The week I'm filming this, the Ford Mustang turns 57 years old. It's been through some ups and downs, some good times and bad. It's been associated with and helped the reputation of legends like Carroll Shelby. It's been the go-to nameplate for many a car chase and many a street race, and with a few noticeable exceptions, like the Pinto-based second-generation Mustang of the 70s and the latter years of the Fox-body Mustangs, which we won't talk about, the car has adorned many a bedroom wall. But back in late 2019, I was among a group of lucky automotive journalists to attend a press briefing at Ford's German design headquarters to preview a Mustang with a difference. The first all-electric series production car from Ford to wear a pony on its nose. And the first Mustang that wasn't the classic Mustang form factor, an electric SUV no less, called the Mustang Mach E. From the moment I first looked at the Mustang Mach E back in that design studio, I was convinced it would sell. I like the design language, evocative enough of the original Mustang essence to have a clear family resemblance, and yet also different enough to set itself apart from what went before. Not everyone felt the same way. In fact, just a few weeks later, when I was in LA for the official Ford Mustang Mach E reveal, the internet forums were full of angry Mustang fans, many of whom had grown up with the brand and everything it stood for, decrying Ford for what it had done. Despite interest from well-known Mustang fan and car guy Jay Leno, who was actually at the pre-reveal press event getting his own private showing, and a sign-off from executive chairman and great-grandson of Henry Ford, Bill Ford, Mustang fans simply weren't happy. They didn't care that Bill Ford, a longtime fan of the Mustang brand who was just a few years old when the first Mustang rolled off the production line, told me at that event he had first felt the same way about the idea of calling an electric SUV a Mustang. They didn't care that he'd been won over after getting behind the wheel of an early prototype and taking it for a spin. And they didn't care that Ford was working on a GT variant with the same kind of high-performance, all-out muscle car specs that gave any existing Mustang a run for its money. They were upset that it was an SUV and that it had a sissy electric motor instead of a throbbing V8 under the hood. But perhaps the real reason they were upset is that the Mustang Mach E, on paper, has the chops to give as good as it gets. It's available with a choice of 68 or 88 usable kilowatt hours of onboard battery. Its most powerful variant, the GT Performance Edition, puts out 480 horsepower or 357 kilowatts and 634 pound-feet or 860 newton-meters of torque, from an all-wheel drivetrain that gets it to the stoplight sprint in just 3.5 seconds. Its rear-wheel drive extended range variant can travel 300 miles or 482 kilometers on the EPA test cycle per charge. And its most affordable version, the standard range rear-wheel drive 230 mile or 370 kilometer Select Edition, starts from just under $43,000 US. And in that first month on sale in the US, Ford has sold nearly 4,000 examples, adding another 2,600 or more in the next month to make the end of the quarter sales 6,614 vehicles. That's not bad for the first quarter of sales. Tesla managed to deliver just under 2,000 examples of its Model 3 in its first 2 quarters of production. And I can't tell you what the production figures were for the first quarter of Model Y production because Tesla lumps Model 3 and Model Y together. Either way, it's a significant amount for Ford. The too long didn't read here is that Ford means business, and the Mach E is eager to help catapult Ford from its previous status as a company that just made compliance car EVs to one that's seriously eager to have a bit of the EV performance car market. And today I'm going to see just how close it comes to that. Can it really meet those lofty expectations? How does it compare to some of the other cars in the marketplace? And what's it like to live with? Before we go out onto the road, I wanted to give you some of the key specifications for the entire Ford Mustang Mach E. It's 186 inches long, which is 4.7 meters, and it's 74 inches wide, which is 1.8 meters. Part of that width obviously is so noticeable here at the rear with these lovely haunches. I really like them. Design-wise, the Mustang Mach E has got some really glorious sweeps accented by the front hood. And when you're sat behind the wheel, it does make you feel like you're behind the wheel of a Mustang. It's that classic Mustang front end, those sweepy, sporty bonnets that have been iconic through the brand, most definitely in recent years. The wheels are, of course, available in a variety of different sizes, but the actual brakes themselves in the Mustang Mach E, you've got 17-inch discs at the rear, and you've got 18-inch vented discs at the front. If you opt for the standard battery pack, your rear cargo capacity is 29.7 cubic feet, which is equivalent to about 822 litres. But if you go for the slightly longer-legged variant, the extended battery pack, that is reduced to 26.6 cubic feet, which is 753 litres. Of course, if you fold those rear seats flat, which you can do very easily in the Ford Mustang Mach E, you gain access to a whole lot of extra luggage space. If you go for the extended battery, you're gonna get slightly smaller cargo space as you are just in the rear, but if you opt for the standard battery pack, you have up to 59.7 cubic feet available to you, which equates to about 1,689 litres. And of course, we can't forget the front trunk, which in the Ford Mustang Mach E is 4.7 cubic feet, equivalent to 139.5 litres. Now, if you've been in the EV world for any length of time, I'm sure you're familiar with the concept of frunk puppies. Tesla owners taking cute photographs of their dogs sitting in the front trunk of their Teslas, with the bonnet up, of course. Please don't put your dog in and then shut the door. That would be bad. But Mustang Mach E was advertised in a very different way. Ford designed the front trunk to be capable of hosting front trunk parties, like a trunk party or a tailgate party, but instead from the front of your car. So it designed the front space in the Ford Mustang Mach E to have a drain plug, so you could fill up the front trunk of your vehicle with ice, some lovely beverages, and then pop the drain plug to clear it out afterwards. There are even two molded spaces in the front trunk for you to store a beverage can, but please don't drink alcohol and drive your Mach E. The only other thing I want to bring your attention to, other than the general sweeping, the all-glass roof, is this touch button release for both the rear doors and also the front doors. You press the button and it's pushed open by a mechanism inside the door. Now, that's fancy. We're used to cars now that can open and close their doors automatically, especially in the high-end premium segment. But there is a method in the madness here. By having an actuator that pushes the door open, Ford eliminates the door handle, the traditional door handle. It means it doesn't have to worry about recessed door handles, which can cause some extra problems, and it dramatically improves the aerodynamic qualities of the car. Plus, there are these rather cute little winglets on the front. You push the button and then you can grab hold of it to pull open the door. You can't close the door until you've opened it a little way. I'll show you now. If I try and close this right now, it's actually prevented from closing and I have to open the door a little bit, wait for the motor to whir, and then yes, I can close the door. It takes some getting used to, but it's a neat feature. Personally, I'd rather have door handles because I'm one of these people that would like to get into their car even if there's a problem. And that's been a problem for certain early Ford Mustang Mach E's. Ford issued a recall to fix a problem with certain Mustang Mach E's that meant that when their batteries were being charged from a domestic charging station or a high power charging station, their 12-volt batteries would run flat. And if your 12-volt battery runs flat, that's going to be difficult to do. Let's take a look inside the Mustang Mach E. You've got a very wonderful, clear, bright display in front of the driver. You've got automatic seats with memory positions. It guides you into position, adjusts the mirrors, which is great if you are sharing this car with somebody else. You can adjust the amount of feedback you get from the steering wheel depending on whether you like lighter steering or heavier steering, and that in part is controlled by the 3 operational modes that you have in the Mach E. This week I've been driving mostly in Whisper. Whisper is the everyday default drive mode, and I've been using that for most of this week. You'll see down here there are some options available to you in all 3 modes, and don't worry, I'll go through them all, but let's talk about the options first. The one pedal drive, of course, is essential to anyone who is already an EV fan. Most EV drivers I know prefer to use one pedal to bring the car to a complete standstill rather than rely on using the brake pedal. One pedal drive is available even if the car is fully charged, which means the car is very predictable in the way it behaves, regardless of how full the battery pack is. Then you've got the auto ambient light selection. There are some lovely lighting effects in this variant of the Mustang Mach E, very understated lights that are not too distracting, and you also have propulsion sound, which is the sound that Ford pipes into the cabin. It's somewhere between a distant V8 and a spaceship. I'm not a fan of that particular propulsion sound, and most of the time this week I've driven with it off. Next you have Engage, and I should note that when I touch these modes, the display behind the steering wheel also changes with a different theme for each. Engage firms up the steering a little bit, it gives a different throttle response, so it is more eager to accelerate when you touch the go pedal, and Unbridled is the sporty mode. This is where the steering is the firmest, it tightens up the suspension, it gives you that sporty mode that Mustangs are so well known for. This car has cameras all round, so you can use this screen to see the view from the front or the rear or any of the side cameras. Unfortunately, this doesn't display at speed, it automatically deactivates, but there is a setting that allows you to add a little bit of extra delay to the rear camera, just so that when you exit the reverse mode, it stays on screen for a few seconds. Automatic parking is available. It's not like a Tesla where you can park the car from outside the vehicle, but there's a button here that allows you to choose between parallel parking or bay parking, and the car will identify a parking space it can fit into and it will park itself. However, as with most systems that operate in this manner, I often find it's easier and simpler just to park yourself. Then we've got the settings screen, which gives you access to all of the assistive technologies that the Mustang Mach E has as standard. We've got speed limit assist, lane keep assist, pre-collision assist, we've got blind spot information systems, we've got cross traffic alerts, reverse brake assist, and all of the other things that make the Mustang Mach E really simple to drive. My favorite assistive technology is the auto hold. This is great if it's paired with one pedal driving, as when you come to a stop, the car automatically applies the friction brakes to stop the car from rolling, and of course it also means if someone was to hit your car from behind, your car is not going to be immediately pushed into the vehicle in front. Finally, you've got some convenience features, including the My Key system, which is standard with all Ford Mustang Mach Es. There's an ability to pair your smartphone with the Mach E to allow your smartphone to operate as your vehicle key. And lots of you were very interested to know how that worked. However, this is a press car, and sometimes with press vehicles, setting up that kind of thing is difficult because at the end of the day, you'd be giving someone access to lock, unlock, and drive a car simply using your mobile phone. So Ford hasn't actually given anybody access to this. Apparently, it used to give journalists a mobile phone that stayed in the car, but this car didn't come with one, so I haven't been able to use that unlock and lock feature paired with my phone. You also have a power lift gate, which you can set to be manual or automatic, and there's also a hands-free operation, which means you wave your foot underneath the tailgate and it will automatically operate for you. Like many modern electric cars on the market today, the Mustang Mach E comes with fully automatic headlights. You can operate them manually from the control on the left of the steering column, but you can also have everything operate automatically. And I have to say, the headlights in the Ford Mustang Mach E are some of the best headlights I've seen. They're not yellow, very bright white light. They don't appear to be super dazzling, and they create a very good view of the road ahead. They're also auto dimming, which is useful if, like me, you live in the country. The Mustang Mach E does have onboard navigation, which is very good. I was using that on my way up here today. It takes up the majority of the screen, but it also displays on the driver's cluster the next thing that you need to do. It's very responsive. You can change the destination using voice controls, or if you prefer to use Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, that's a possibility too. It works through direct connection through USB, or if your phone is compatible, wireless, and it takes up the top half of the screen. I'd love to show you some of the Apple CarPlay functionality, but my Apple iPhone X has been misbehaving all day. It's got nothing to do with the Mach E because I tested it in my own car earlier and it's just really sluggish. I think I probably need to do a software reinstall. It too can be operated through voice commands. You press and hold for your mobile phone voice assistant, or just use a quick press to activate the Ford Voice Sync system. Some reviewers have noticed that the Ford Mustang Mach E's screen is not always the most responsive, as demonstrated here, entering into valet mode, which is of course great if you don't want your Mach E to be driven by a valet at breakneck speed like that very famous scene in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. You know, the one with the Ferrari. But for the most part, the screen is generally pretty responsive, and the good news here is that Ford has over-the-air software updates so it can continue to revise the car's software as it ages. And unlike some cars that require you to be parked in order to apply a software update, Ford's system uses two memory banks, the one that you're using when you're driving the car, and if there's a new software update pushed, it's downloaded in the background to that secondary memory slot. Then the next time you start the car up, it will automatically switch to the new firmware. It's a good way of making sure that you don't have to park your car up for an extended period of time just to get new bells and whistles. We made it to a charging station. I'm not gonna lie to you, there's still like 70 miles remaining on this car's state of charge. It's like 30 something percent. I tried really hard to empty it. I've driven 140 miles up here and then 20 miles around town, and it still has 70 plus in the tank. So let's just plug in and charge because I need to get home. One of the nice things about the Mustang Mach E is it has plug and charge capability, which means that you can literally just grab the connector from a plug and charge compatible charging station, plug the car in, and it starts refueling automatically if you've set it up. That's far better than grabbing your mobile phone and logging into the app and making sure you've got funds in your account. None of that anymore, it just happens. Let's see if it actually just happens. So I'm gonna walk over here. I'm gonna grab this cable. This is a 150 kilowatt capable charging station. Gonna plug it in. I'm gonna hold it because that's what I have to do on my Bolt, force of habit. The charging station says it's connecting to the vehicle, and the circle's going round like you'd expect. Hopefully, fingers crossed, plug and charge will work first time. Obviously, it has to go back to whatever the server is for Electrify America. I know these charging stations can sometimes be a bit slow, but I just heard a relay activate. That means that it was successful, and it should be now getting ready to charge. It pops the relays a couple of times to check the circuits to make sure everything is safe. And then it says, "Welcome, driver. It is now successfully charging." And that is so much quicker than me whipping out the app and signing in, figuring out where I am, Because that's one of the challenges with the Electrify America app and pretty much every other charging app. You have to have cell phone reception, you have to know where you are, otherwise you can't always initiate charging. And sometimes even if you're in the right place, if your phone thinks you're somewhere else, it can take a while. I'm going to see how quickly this is charging, and then hopefully I can get back on the road to home. Right now, 33% state of charge. I've been charging for 1 minute. My charge rate right now is 140 kilowatts. I've put 2 kilowatt hours in just a minute. This shouldn't take very long for me to charge. It's now doing 141 kilowatts, which seems to be pretty close to that 150 kilowatt limit. And anybody who is picking holes in the Mach E and saying, oh, it doesn't achieve its theoretical maximum charge rate, I defy you to find any electric vehicle that does exactly what its maximum charge rate is, that's capable of this high power charging. Yes, my Chevrolet Bolt EV tends to max out at 55 kilowatts, which is its theoretical maximum limit, but that's 55 kilowatts. How fast these charging stations can charge is based on a whole load of different factors, including the outside temperature, how warm the battery pack is in the car, what the state of charge of the battery pack is, and at the moment we're down to 129 kilowatts because we've reached 38% state of charge. So in the time I've stood here, which is 3 minutes, we have gone from 31% state of charge all the way to 38% state of charge. We're now charging at 125 kilowatts. We're now at 42% state of charge. We've put in 10 kilowatt hours in 5 minutes, and we've paid $3.87. Well, I haven't. Whoever this car is registered to, which in this case is Ford's press department, has paid $3.87 to fill the car up. But if you consider that this is a vehicle that has in excess of 200 miles easily achievable, even if you drive it really hard, and closer to 270 miles if you're really a little bit more normal about your driving, being able to add that kind of amount of power in 5 minutes is awesome, because it means it takes less time than it would take you to walk over to the coffee bar that's right across the way from here, order a coffee, pick it up and come back. The more full a car's battery pack gets, the slower the rate of charge becomes. And that's just physics, and that's just the car and its battery management system protecting itself. All right, we are 9 minutes into our rapid charging session. We pulled up with 31% state of charge, and we've just hit 51% state of charge. So we've added 20%. We're now beyond halfway full, and we have put in 18 kilowatt hours. It's cost us $7.31. Obviously you wouldn't be doing that on every trip. This is just when you're on a longer distance trip. But the fact that that's happened in less than 10 minutes is very, very good news, especially if you're traveling with kids and they don't want to sit at a charging station for a long time. You can distract kids for 10 minutes and add a decent amount of range to this car in under 10 minutes. I have heard people say they want to know how quickly the car charges once it gets to an 80% state of charge, but the reality is, with any rapid charging experience, once you get to 80%, things are gonna slow down. At 53% state of charge, we're still putting 112 kilowatts into the battery pack, and the fans under the hood have just come on, which means that the car is actively now trying to keep the battery pack cool. It's not a particularly hot day here today. It's in the mid 60 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 something Celsius, but it's still keeping the car cool because that battery pack has started to heat up, and that's a side effect of you trying to push as many electrons into the battery pack as possible in as short amount of time as possible, which is why you have a high charge rate. The fact though that we are still charging at 110 kilowatts and we have a 55% state of charge is pretty darned impressive as far as I'm concerned. I've had the Mustang Mach E now for a week, and during that time I've tried to do as much with it as I possibly can. I've done a couple of long distance road trips. I went up to Olympia yesterday, and I've also taken it shopping. I've picked up my dog from the vets in it. I've even taken this car to the DIY store a couple of times. And sometimes when I have a car on a week-long review, I find it hard to get a measure of what the car is capable of. But the Mustang Mach E is really easy to figure out. At its heart, this is a performance SUV. But when you're driving it around town, if you put it in whisper mode, it is incredibly easy to drive it just like any other family car. It's not difficult. And by that I mean it accelerates smoothly. It's not so twitchy that you feel pushed to drive it in a sporty manner all the time. And the single pedal driving really makes a massive difference. The noise inside the cabin on country roads like this is a little bit louder than it might be on a well-kept freeway, but it's nothing intrusive, and I don't feel that the car is badly built or that there's not enough sound deadening, because frankly, I think there is. And if you don't have the in-cabin noise pumped in from the fake V8, it does still give you a really good idea of what's going on around you, especially at low speeds. Like most EVs, this does have a pedestrian warning system. It's required by law in many markets. But that noise is not so obtrusive that it's annoying. What did catch me unawares though was the reverse beep. This car has a reverse beep. It's very clear. And I think it's a good idea because not everybody is looking around when they're crossing the parking lots, glued to their mobile phone. Let's talk about handling. Coming around this twisty road here, the car sits very nicely down and there's no hint of oversteer or understeer, despite this being a pretty chunky SUV. It's really easy to thread the Mach E through these corners, and I don't feel like the car is fighting me at any point. It's very well engineered from a handling perspective. Right now I'm in whisper mode, but if I was to switch to engage or unbridled, the steering stiffens up a little bit and it requires a little bit more work to wind the car round the bends. It's not too much work though. It just reminds you that you're sitting behind the wheel of a sports car. I've just joined Skyline, which is one of the more enjoyable drives here in the greater Portland area. It's right up in the mountains and it's a real twisty road, and I'm going to show you how this car handles on open roads. I'm actually going to turn the propulsion sound on and I'm going to gun it a bit. And you can hear the noise from that fake V8, and while I'm not a fan, it does really egg you on. The car is very swift in its acceleration, and at no point does it feel like it's giving me power in a uncouth way. Even though this car has bucket loads of torque and bucket loads of power, it's feeling refined every step of the way, and frankly, the car is handling every corner with aplomb. Interestingly, this is where Harley-Davidson filmed the B-roll for the Harley-Davidson Livewire launch. And I've always been very keen to take a Harley-Davidson Livewire up here. Sadly, I haven't had the chance yet. I've got to say, this part of Skyline is further out of Portland than the bit that most people drive. And as such, the road is not as well kept. But even on tight corners like that, the Mustang Mach E really manages to thread itself through every single corner. Really grip well, and at no point do I feel like I'm pushing the car anywhere near its limit. Listen to that sound. It is very addictive, even though I'm not a big fan. If you don't like that noise though, you can simply turn it off. And then you get the full electric motor sound. To my ear, the motor sound in the Mach E is quieter than the motor sound in the Porsche Taycan and the Tesla Model S. However, it's a very pleasant sound, and it certainly reminds you that you've got bucket loads of torque and bucket loads of power available. In unbridled mode, I missed a chipmunk. There you go, I missed a chipmunk. That was scary. In unbridled mode, you feel your heart rate rising, you feel the car egging you on, and you really want to see what it can offer. But with the massive amount of power under your right foot, certainly in the all-wheel drive variants, it's oh so easy to be well above the speed limit. And for twisties like this, you really do have to use both the brake pedal and the accelerator. Most of the time this week, I've been driving around literally with just my right foot on the accelerator and making use of the single pedal driving. But for real engaging experiences on twisties like this, you need to have access to the brake pedal too. And the car is just gripping at every possible turn. Ford really has outdone itself with the Mustang Mach E in terms of performance. It's quick, it's responsive, and I don't feel like this car has got too much power or that I can't handle it. It gives me confidence at every possible turn. Like many EVs on the market today, you have access to something called L mode, low mode, and you can activate it by pressing the button in the center of the gear selector. It gives you a little bit more braking when you lift off the throttle. But I mean, I just went around that corner at 40 miles an hour and the car just glued itself to the road. There you go. I was able to unset the car there. I don't know if you heard, there was a little bit of screeching of tyres just as I went round the corner there. I was doing about 44 miles an hour. It tightened up, and because it's early in the morning here, the car really wasn't too happy about keeping its feet on the ground, but it was very measured in its letting me know that it was nearing the edge of its grip. As a sports car, I would say that the Mach E doesn't have the most comfortable of suspension setups in unbridled mode, but then really honestly, how many people are going to drive this every day in unbridled mode on a road like this, pushing the car to its absolute limits? Not that many. If you're ever up in the Portland area, you really do need to try Skyline, either on a motorbike or in a car. It really is an enjoyable experience. Today, I'm not going to lie, I'm quite quick along here, but even if you fancy driving a little bit more slowly, it's still very enjoyable. One of the things about the Mustang Mach E I'm not so keen on is how big it is. On roads like this, it is possible to thread it round corners like I just did, and it just behaves itself extremely well, but sometimes you do feel that extra weight and you feel the extra size. Sometimes when we've got a car on loan, I drive it, I enjoy it, and then I can't wait to give it back. Sometimes I hate it and try and drive it as little as possible. Other times I find out that I like the car and I want to keep it. And sometimes I want to hide it. And I think the Mustang Mach E fits into the latter category. It's a really accessible vehicle. Despite its big size, it's actually very nimble on country roads and little twisty mountain lanes like this. But at the same time, Winter asked me yesterday if I would trade my Chevrolet Bolt in to get one, and I told him no. The reason has got nothing to do with the Mustang Mach E's charging speed. It's far faster than my Bolts. It's got nothing to do with its performance. Although I'll admit, if I had a car that was this powerful, I would probably lose my driving license pretty quickly. Sure, the suspension is a little bit firm, especially on this very unlooked after and unloved mountain pass. But really the reason that I wouldn't buy one is the size. This car is far bigger than I really need, and I would love this to be a hot hatch or something similar. So there was the mountain pass. I've got to admit, it's one of my favourite roads, and I do that fairly often when I'm in need of a bit of a pick-me-up and an adrenaline rush. I think I'm probably slightly faster in my Chevrolet Bolt EV than I was in the Mustang Mach E, but that's not because this car was slow or because it handled poorly. It's because this is not my car, and I know my Chevrolet Bolt far better. I think with practice, I could have been a lot quicker through that mountain pass in this car than I was my own. Driving on a two-lane highway like this, the Mustang Mach E is incredibly well refined. There's a little bit of road noise that permeates into the cabin, but that really does depend on the road conditions outside, and I'm able to have a normal conversation without feeling the need to raise my voice. And that's very important if you want to take this on a long distance trip. There's nothing worse than being stuck in a loud car for hours at a time, even if it's a fun drive. When you hit the go pedal, if you have the propulsion sound engaged, you hear the noise come from the back of the car, just as you would from the exhaust in a regular car. But when you turn it off, the interior of the Mach E is pretty serene, even in unbridled mode, and the car does everything that you would expect of it. It handles the road well. It's not too obtrusive in what you're hearing from the road ahead, and the handling is really sweetly set up. One thing I will note about the Mach E is how long it takes to charge at nighttime. When I pulled in last night, I did have about 25% state of charge remaining in the battery pack, and I charged it for about 8 hours, and this morning it was about 85-90% full. Now that's because this car has an 88 kilowatt hour battery pack, and 88 kilowatt hours, well, if you had a completely flat battery pack and you had a 6 kilowatt charging station, it would take about 14 hours to charge overnight. However, the car can charge at a higher speed if you have a more powerful charging station. But then again, how many people are going to completely drain this car's battery pack every single night? And how many of those are not going to be willing to buy a 10 or 11 kilowatt charging station? Not very many, I suspect. Getting stuck in a queue of traffic in the morning rush hour doesn't really make for good car review viewing. However, the sunlight streaking through into the cabin reminds me to talk to you about the angle of the center touchscreen display. When I first saw the Mustang Mach E, I didn't like the fact that this was extremely vertical, and I didn't when I first got into the car at the start of last week. That, everybody, is the emergency braking. It flashes red on the display. Somebody in front had stopped in a hurry. The Subaru directly in front of me had almost hit the car in front of it. Luckily, I hit neither of them, and the braking as activated there was smooth. I did put my own braking effort in, but the car did most of the hard work. Early electric cars like the first generation Nissan Leaf and even my Chevrolet Bolt EV don't have electronically adjustable driver's seats, and in North America at least, That's become a norm. It's become an expectation that car buyers have, that when they get behind the wheel, they're going to be able to electronically adjust their seat rather than use those old-fashioned sliders. I'm a fan of sliders. I like manual things because it's less to go wrong with the car and it's a lot cheaper to fix when things do go wrong. But the Mustang Mach E does have an electronically adjustable front seat. It's got 3 memory positions. You can adjust it in the normal ways, so fore and aft, up and down, and you can adjust the rake of the backrest. And there's also an adjustable lumbar support. You can't move the lumbar support up and down the seat back, but you can adjust its firmness. There was an old school Mustang behind me on the slip road, and I thought it would be fun to just give them a little taste of what this car can do. And they will probably be overtaking me soon in the left-hand lane, so I'm curious to see what the reaction is as they go past. For the most part, the reaction to the Mustang Mach E has been really positive. Lots of people take photographs on the freeway, lots of people giving us thumbs up, and lots of people questioning what the car is as we're driving along. I would actually say that I've had more interest in this car than I have had in any car I've driven for a really long time. Even the Aotearoa FUV didn't get quite as much attention as the Mustang Mach E. And I think that's because everybody recognizes the Mustang badge, but not everyone recognizes the Mustang Mach E. It's a classic, iconic design already. It is, frankly, a beautiful vehicle. But at the same time, it's something new and different. It's not what people expect from the Mustang brand. And I think that's really going to help Ford in the long term. While I love this car, and in fact, I really don't want to give it back, it's too big for my personal tastes. I would love the essence of this car boiled down into a smaller EV. And we know that Ford is working on something right now, a smaller, equally potent, fun hot hatch, at least if the rumours are to be believed. They're working on something in collaboration with Volkswagen. And if that is true, I cannot wait to put that particular car through its paces. For me, the Mustang Mach E is very much an American car, an all-American muscle car. And that's fine, but for this Brit, it still feels just a little bit too big. Maybe as a family car, yes, but as my own personal daily driver, nah. So there you have it, the Ford Mustang Mach E Premium. I'm not going to lie, coming to this from a Chevrolet Bolt EV, it feels big, especially on my driveway where there's a 90-degree turn between the driveway and the parking space in front of my garage. It has been a pain to park this week, and I wish it had a better turning circle than it did, which is 38.1 feet or 11.6 meters if you're curious. But when you are inside, when you're moving, it doesn't feel so big. It's undeniable you're in an SUV, and the view out the front window and the view in the mirrors remind you that the car is big and sporty. The car has beautiful lines and lovely hips, and when you're behind the wheel, the response from the right foot feels sporty. It feels powerful, and I'm not going to say, well, I am. It's all too easy to break the speed limit in this particular car. I'm not a fan of the internal engine noise. You can turn those off, and the dashboard could be improved a bit. But other than that, this is a warning shot across the bow of any car company that believes Ford isn't serious about EVs. And that includes those in and out of the Bay Area. Lane keep assist and cruise control is lovely, but it feels safe, competent, and most importantly fun. And it doesn't feel compromised in any way when you're on the road. I can imagine spending hours in this. It's a road tripping car, and it's a daily driver. And yes, finally, it is a Mustang. Look, I know that some people are upset about this being called a Mustang, but it has the performance, it has the style, and it has the ability to take names and kick butt. And honestly, I think it embodies all of the sporty, fun performance the original classic Mustangs were known for. All but the noise. Which leads me to this. We are seeing a shift away from fossil fuels. Some of it's happening in the marketplace, some of it's happening by force. Either way, car companies are needing to find alternatives to the muscle cars of old. And Ford's solution to combine the ever-popular world of SUVs and burgeoning world of electric drivetrains with one of its most iconic muscle car brands? That was a bold move that paid off. Would I own one? No, I like my cars to be smaller. A hot hatch Ford Fiesta EV with this kind of performance would totally float my boat. Or maybe, just maybe, the Ford F-150 EV. We know it's going to be using some of the Mustang Mach E's DNA in its construction. We know it's going to offer similar onboard tech and power. And as someone who runs a business that needs hauling capabilities, camera gear takes up a surprising amount of space, I think that may just be in my future. And that really excites me a lot. What say you? Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.